Hello, Pitch Warriors, and welcome to our latest Pitch Wars Live. Tonight, we have another round of amazing young adult mentors. I can't wait for you to get to know them. I'm Nikki, your host. I'm also a YA mentor, but I want you to get to know these people in particular who are going to introduce themselves now. Let's start with Ashley.
Unmute myself. Hi guys, I'm Ashley Hearn. I'm a YA mentor this year, and I'm a writer represented by Krista Heschke at Macintosh and Otis. And I'm also an associate YA editor at Page Street Publishing, which is a mid-sized press distributed by Macmillan, where I'm acquiring and editing YA. And we're also supposed to say like what genres we're...
Yes, everyone can say their genres that they want, but don't get too specific.
Cool. I'm pretty much looking for everything in YA. I don't really want to limit myself. I love fantasy, paranormal, Southern Gothic, horror, magical realism, contemporary. Really looking for basically everything except I'm passing on the sci-fi this year. But I know there are a bunch of other mentors that are awesome and looking for sci-fi. So bring everything on. So.
Hi, I'm Helene Dunbar. I'm mentoring for my third year with my CP, Beth Hall. I'm repped by Lauren McLeod of the Strathmore Agency, Strathman, sorry, and the author of These Gentle Wounds, What Remains, Boomerang, which is coming out in March, and some super secret things I can't talk about yet. And we're basically looking for contemporary, light fantasy, paranormal, near historical, the absolute like blow me out of the water memoir we would consider. No like space opera, heavy epic fantasy. What else? You know, blow us away with your characters. That's basically our MO.
Hi, everybody. Meet myself here. Hi, everybody. I am Isabel Davis, and I am represented by Mary Moore of Kimberly and Associates. I think I said that right. I'm looking for YA fantasy, adventure, historical, no science fiction this year. I'm so sorry. Yeah, and I think that's it.
Laura, would you like to go next?
Sorry, I just realized it was me. So I'm Laura, and I'm represented by Sarah Lapola at Bradford. And what else? Sci-fi here, which knows me, and I love sci-fi. It's best thing ever for me. I love aliens. I love the weirdest shit you can come up with. So if you have a really weird book that you have no agent for, that no one loves, I'll probably love it. And I'm especially looking for POC submissions, because I think that's really important and that we should level the ground right now. So this is one of the things I'm really adamant about in my submissions.
Hi, I am Mikkel George. I am also a YA mentor, and I'm represented by Katie Grimm of Don Congdon Associates. And my debut is a YA historical that comes out in September called Speakeasy Speak Love, and I'm really excited and occasionally nauseated by that fact. And I'm looking for tough contemporary, like The Female of the Species, most definitely historical, particularly LGBT relationships in historical. Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue was one of my favorite books this year. We're also looking for magical realism, particularly diverse magical realism, and some high concept fantasy and sci-fi portal fantasy, and Throne of Glass-like things are probably not for us, but things like Six of Crows are. And also gothic stuff like Crimson Peak, Penny Dreadful kind of gothic, yeah.
Hi, I'm Natasha Razi. I am also a YA mentor. I am an intern at the Bent Agency, as well as I work on like 5 different magazines and groups. You don't need to hear the list. But I am accepting every genre. I do have a particular weakness for contemporary and fantasy, but whatever you've got that has strong characters, interesting twists, I'm here for it. I am only not representing. Sorry, I'm good with the written words. I'm not so good with the words with my mouth. I'm only looking for submissions for underrepresented writers that can include LGBTQ people, people with mental or physical disabilities, people of color, Native Americans, Muslims, Jewish people, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to interrogate you about this. I don't expect you to give me a laundry list, but, you know, be honest. This is something that's really important to me. I also, like Laura, I really care about leveling the playing field. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm Ruth Ann Snow. I'm a YA writer. My contemporary debut is coming out in 18-ish months. I'm represented by Maria Vicente at PS Literary. This is my second year doing Pitch Wars. I'm super excited. And I'm looking for contemporary, like across the board, other than the one little thing I'm not looking for is like the super dark, you want to like cry all the time contemporary. I need like some crying is fun, but there needs to be like laughing too for me. I'm also looking for historical, and then anything that's like historical or contemporary with like a dash of fantasy or sci-fi would be fine. I think like the line for me is like Game of Thrones with like a little bit of dragons, but not like Lord of the Rings where it's like all elves and hobbits and stuff. That they're like way better mentors out there than me for that. And then also like I would just like die if I could get like a mystery or thriller or you know, like I'm trying to remember or horror. So I'm pretty wide open, but just not like super dark or super hardcore fantasy. So
okay, hi, I'm Sarah Nicholas. This is my 6th year mentoring YA. I've been on since the very beginning. I started when I was reading Slush for Entangled Publishing, and then I became the publicity director a couple years later. I don't do that anymore, but I now write for Book Riot. So I like pretty much every genre except for like hardcore horror or historical with any kind of fantastical elements or anything like that is fine, but just straight historical is not really my thing. I'm really into high concept contemporary and pretty much anything under the spec fic genre umbrella except for horror, like I said.
And I'm Nikki Roberti. I'm represented by Laura Bradford. And I'm looking for contemporary, sci-fi, historical, anything Ruth Ann just mentioned, and like funny stuff. I really, really want funny this year, I think. But every time I say that, I always pick something with a lot of heart too. So who knows? But that's enough about what we're looking for. You can always go in our bios. If you have a question for us, get on Twitter and do #AskMentor. Our amazing Twitter captor this evening, Kat Cho, is manning the feed and talking to me right now. And she just sent us our first question, which is from David Tucker. Hey, Pitch Wars, I have a question. What do you expect in a synopsis? What should I include? Any advice? Anyone want to share their wisdom on synopsises?
Find Susan Dennard's blog post about how to write a synopsis and replicate that advice. It's the synopsis writing Bible. I think it's a pub crawl blog post, and I can probably find the link to it and tweet it out later, but it is actually the synopsis writing Bible. So, and Susan Dennard's full of great writing advice. So
I'm going to say for us, I don't care what you put in your synopsis as long as it tells the story, because really we ask for a synopsis anytime we ask for additional pages, and it's really just to see your story arc, how the characters develop. We'll work with you later, you know, if you're a mentor, on getting that ready for agents, but I'm not really like bent out of shape about the quality of the writing. I just want to know what the story is.
I would say, and I read this advice somewhere, and I hope it wasn't also Susan Dennard, because then I'd be completely redundant to what Ashley said, but take like one character if you can and follow the whole thing through their eyes. So like the good example is like if you wanted to synopsize Star Wars, like episode 4, it would just be Luke the whole time. And then, you mention Han Solo, you mention Princess Leia, but you just follow Luke through the whole story. So you can summarize everything in 2 pages without getting too sidetracked. And that's what I would do, especially if you have a big cast.
Kind of in line with the note about big casts, don't mention too many characters by name, because that's the #1 way to confuse people, because we don't have context for how to understand the characters. So you really want to only stick to the main character, maybe the love interest and the villain, and I would say at most 1 side character. But as soon as you start getting over 4 named characters in a synopsis, it's just going to start sounding like name soup. So if you have to bring in another character, you can say like the main character's mom, or the main character's best friend's brother's dog, or whoever needs to come in by their association to the main character.
I think, and I always say this and people don't really believe me, like people worry way too much about their synopsis. And like all I really want to see from it is that your story has like a solid arc. I just need to know that it has like, a decent plot structure so that I can invest my time in reading it. But I wanted to mention I'm actually giving away a synopsis critique on Twitter, but it ends tonight, so you have to enter within the next 3/4 hours.
Natasha, did you want to go next?
Yes, sorry. Before I say something about synopses, I just want to say I have back problems, so I apologize to everyone if it's weird, but I'm going to spend a lot of time going like this and this because I don't usually sit for long periods of time. In terms of synopses, if you're having trouble starting them or structuring them, or you're finding that it's just ending up word soup, something that I found super helpful is to start with a beat sheet. My personal favorite is the Save the Cat beat sheet. You can literally just Google Save the Cat. I know that there was someone named Jane or something that's really good at them, but I don't remember. But if you find a beat sheet and just fill that out and then fill in the words, I find that that's a lot more helpful than trying to produce words from the beginning, because that can get very rambly and stream of consciousness very fast. And the thing that you really want from a synopsis, you want it to be complete and you want it to be concise. You need the story from the very beginning, but you don't need anything except the central plot line.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I for one, I always struggle when I write synopsises still. Like, whew. So we understand your pain, hopefuls. We get it. Our next question is from Amelia Hollinsworth. When y'all read subs, do you read all before making notes, or do you read/stop and make notes as you go? Any repeat year mentors want to talk about your process as you're reading through your inbox? Ruth Ann?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of track changes and like leaving comments for myself. So I make notes like literally just the whole time, just so I can remember what I was thinking at the time. There's like really no rhyme or reason to it, but that's generally how I go. And then when I realize I'm like connecting particularly to one manuscript, then I already have like everything I have. And I know not every mentor gives feedback, and last year I didn't give everybody feedback, but I did try to give feedback to people I requested fulls as much as possible. And so then I've just got those little notes there, and I can just be like, this is what I was thinking. If it's helpful at all, I hope it's, whatever. But if it's not helpful, just like toss it in the trash. So anyways, that's kind of how I go through subs.
Yeah, so kind of like Ruth, I had ambitions of giving everyone notes who subbed to me, and then that didn't happen because there was just too much. So if I end up requesting a full manuscript from you, then I will definitely make notes as I go. But for the first submission, for the first page, I don't make notes, and I can tell after reading so many submissions, like as an editor and through Pitch Wars, if I'm connecting to it or not. And if I connect to it after that first chapter, then I'll ask you, for probably the full manuscript, because in case I do really love it, I don't want to have to stop and then ask you for the rest of it. So I always ask for fulls, and then I might make notes as I go. I always have like a Google Doc where I just say, these are the things that are sticking out to me that I love, or these are the questions or maybe problems I'm having, and I might reserve judgment to see if I finish. But honestly, if there are too many problems after a certain point, I just stop reading. I don't have time to read the whole full manuscript of everything that I sub. And if there are too many issues for me personally, and this is a really subjective process too, like maybe I'm not connecting to it emotionally, I just stop reading and don't make any more notes. And if it's and if I don't connect with your first chapter, I probably just won't ask for pages, honestly.
So my entire life is like in Excel sheets, but it's weird because this is the one thing that I don't really put in Excel. I utilize my Google, but basically I just read through. I always read the query, and I'll read at least the first 2 paragraphs. Sometimes I just know like it's not right for me. But then I just go into folders and it's like yes, no, maybe, or like that's what they're called, but it's like really interested, maybe interested, and definitely not. And then I just like, I don't know, I get really distracted and I jump around and I go back and forth and parts, and I always request fulls because it's the same thing. I don't want to waste any time. So if I requested a partial and I just like really loved it and it was killing me, I don't want to wait. Even if it's like just a couple hours for the rest of it. So I always request fulls, and I also always request synopsis because I want to make sure that the plot arc is there before I get 100 pages in, and which has happened before. So and then I just kind of narrowed it down. But a lot of times, honestly, I just know, like there's just one that I can't stop thinking about when I go offline. I know that happened to Ashley last year. That happened to me last year. And there's just like that one that just you can't stop thinking about at all. And so at that point, it's not even like the others aren't good. It's just that one is just got your heart and won't let it go.
Yeah, I mean, Beth and I have the interesting, experience of co-mentoring. So we both use a Google Doc and folders within a shared mailbox where we start whittling things down and we color code things. And there's a lot of kind of debates behind the scenes. Yes, no, maybe. Well, I really like this, consider it. We only ask for fulls for exactly the same reason. We want to read the whole thing. We've got time. We're excited about it. But I did want to say that timing doesn't really matter. We had something come in, I think the day submissions closed last year, that I was really excited about. And we ended up not taking it on, but I got to work with the author later and I was really excited about that. And she's agented now. But we've got that window for a reason. Don't think that coming in the first day is going to win you anything, because we're considering every manuscript on its own merits.
So this is my first year mentoring, but I have been an intern at the Bent Agency for almost a year now, so I can talk a little bit about my process. I very much, and this was one of the highlights of my internship when I was advanced enough to do this, if I can tell that I'm not connecting with something, I stop reading. Because for me, voice is the biggest thing. Like I can work on plot, I can work on characters, but if out the voice within the first few chapters, then it's a waste of my time to read it, and it's a waste, honestly, for the writer, because I'm not going to have anything useful to say. I'm just going to have the I didn't connect advice that I know that no one likes to hear. In terms of taking notes, I take notes right away. Usually the first chapter, I don't have much to say, but I'm definitely going the whole way through going like, maybe this is sloppy, maybe I love this, maybe this is a great moment. I often at the very end won't have anything additional to say. I'll just call it what I was saying throughout, unless there's this huge change at the end that changes how I saw the whole story. And I like the idea of giving feedback. I really don't want to promise anything. So I can't guarantee that I'll give feedback, but if I request a full, I'll make an effort.
Awesome. Thanks. Anyone else want to go for it, Isabel?
Yes, me. It's such an interesting question. I think that my process is going to completely change. Last year, I would get so excited and I would request right away. And I wasn't taking a lot of notes, but like some people on here, I also had like Google folders and what was I liked this is a maybe or not. I think this year I'm going to read and I'm going to take notes on the manuscripts that I can see that I can really help, and I'm getting excited about those. I don't think I'll take notes for all of them, but if I find myself reading and I'm like, man, I can really, this is how I would smooth this out. This is what I would like. I think then that's when I would start taking notes, and I am going to wait to request until I have read everything, because last year I sat on a pile of full submissions and it was just crazy. So this time I'm just gonna cool my jets and wait for a little bit. So if you don't hear from me, please don't get nervous. It's just, I'm reading.
I just wanted to say, one year I tried to take notes as I was reading subs, and I just fall in love with everything and it got too overwhelming. So now what I do is I just write down the title. And if, as I'm going through the week, I look at my list and I can't remember what that title was about, it just gets knocked off, because the thing I'm going to choose is going to be that book that haunts me all through the submission period.
Yeah, is it fair to say that I picked the book that just kind of fizzles to the top?
Yeah.
I don't want to say I throw my inbox up against a wall and see what sticks, but it's like there's, at least for what happened last year, like I went into the process with like this finely honed system. I made my inbox folders and I was going to do this, and this. And it ended up being kind of, like my attention was just drawn in certain ways. And I guess I just let my attention be drawn, because the ones that were like really pulling me that direction, it was pulling me for a reason. So.
And this is why I always have like a personal crisis and like near the end of submission week. Cause like last year, 2 fizzled to the top and I literally went back and forth like, While we're on submissions and process, we're getting a lot of questions on that. Our next one's from Casey O'Neill, and we're all going to answer this. It's, what is the thing, pet peeve, that will make you quit a sub the fastest? Number one thing not to do when the first pages are query. And we're going to start with Isabel.
I'm unmuted. Okay. What is the one thing that would get me to stop reading? That was the question. Yeah. Okay. I think for me, if I am reading and I am not getting a sense of who the character is and the emotion that's driving them, what they're wanting, if I'm not getting a clear sense of their voice, I mean, not everything has to be clear, because it's the start, it's the beginning. You're just diving into a story, but there has to be something that pulls you. And I think it's the character for me. It's the emotion, it's whatever it is that they're experiencing. It's their voice and how they are perceiving their worldview. I will stop reading if I can't connect with the character. And what I mean by that is if I'm finding the voice is a little lackluster, kind of, it's not really jumping off the page. It's not calling to me. And I think too, for that is if there's this interesting character, but the premise isn't there either. So I think that they both kind of go hand in hand for me. So I have to be really excited about what I'm facing as well.
Laura, would you like to go next?
I think for me, yeah. So I think for me, I'm gonna try to think in book terms. What makes me quit a book really fast is as if the love interest is really obvious in the first pages. Like, this makes me really cringe. I put it in my bio that I really don't like. It's not that I don't like romance, it's just I'm not a huge fan of how it's done. So I'm usually very hard to get with romance. So when it's obvious, like paranormal romance, guy, and then she's like, no. I quit the book so fast, the book doesn't see me running. It's just no. And Isabel said about voice is really important. So sometimes if I get annoyed by voice of the character or whatever, I just don't keep reading a lot. But it really depends, because voice is a really subjective reason. So I can't be really objective to say, this is not something I want in your voice. So it's just about connection. Sometimes you really love something that it's not your thing, or sometimes something should really be your thing and you hate it. So
yeah, so I think for me, at the query stage, before I even get to the actual pages, if you sub me something that I kind of specifically said that I wouldn't really like, or that I'm not really looking for, that's an automatic no. Also, if I see something that I think is offensive or problematic in the query or in the first few pages, that's another automatic no. I also tend, and a problem I see in a lot of queries and first pages, is that it's really unfocused and really vague. And I think the problem is like this process that everyone's talking about, how you're like the ones that stand out to you and like, you know, don't let go of you and kind of fizzle up to the top. When queries are kind of unfocused and vague, and they're not, don't have any of those specifics or stakes or conflicts, then those are the ones that slip. Like I almost forget them as soon as I move on to the next submission. So that way, but then otherwise, I think, as everyone is saying, I'm looking for good writing and connection and something I haven't seen before. And there are an infinite number of ways to do that, and it's a very subjective process at that point.
So I know that I just said in the last question that I'll stop reading right away if I don't connect with something, but the fact is, in the first few pages, like, one of my favorite books is Six of Crows, and I don't even like the starting pages of that. Like, if your story takes a while to get started, that's a very easy thing for me to work with you on. Pet peeves that are going to make me stop reading. First of all, I like tropes if you're very aware of them, but completely unself-aware tropes or cliches, especially ones like, I don't know, tortured bad boys or like beautiful girls who don't know they're beautiful. I just don't have a lot of patience for that. Also, if you use any kind of slur in the first several pages without any sort of awareness or interrogation of that, especially like psychopath or sociopath, I see a lot. I have stopped reading books that I really enjoyed because they used the term psychopath. Like that's just an immediate no for me. But yeah, frankly, like, unless there's something I find actively offensive, I'm gonna read past the first few pages, and it's usually, it takes me at least 10 to 15 pages before I go, no, this is not something I want, which is convenient because that's the number of pages that you guys are sending us.
So I agree pretty much with a lot of what has already been said. If the query is vague and it doesn't seem like there's really stakes, it'll be, you know, and the thing is like bad queries are like acceptable. Like you can work on them more, but I mean, you want to see where this thing is going. You want to know, like, it's like the back cover of a book. Like if you were in a bookstore and you're picking out a book to buy, you're not going to buy the one that has a vague back page. You're just not. And I agree, if there's anything that it seems like problematic, I would hope you could go back and fix that, like learn about sensitivity readers and all these things, but that's not something I have any time for in such a short time frame. And then I think like a pet peeve in the pages for me is, and the thing is like, I love like a snarky character, but if it's like snark, 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 and like joke and sarcasm and like there's like, it's like unrelenting, it's like a fire hose of like, you know, I think that there's a point where I think all writers need to learn that like you need to edit yourself, and just because like you could make a joke doesn't mean you have to make a joke. Not like, you know, just tone it down a little bit, like if you've gone too far. And I hope that makes sense. Sometimes you can't see it as a writer, but like hopefully your CPs and betas are telling you like whoa, too much, like edit down a little bit. You know, yeah. If you've ever watched Project Runway, if it helps at all, like whenever Tim Gunn says like edit thoughtfully, like, and you've gone too far, I actually think everybody should just go watch a whole season of Project Runway while you're like preparing to write things. It's actually super helpful when it comes to the creative process. And like, have you gone too far or have you not gone far enough? And I think it's a hard balance, but you have to find it.
I actually published a blog post yesterday. It was like 15 things not to say in your query at Wyatopia, if you want to find that on Twitter. And the biggest ones all have to do with showing me that you haven't read widely in your genre. Because a lot of times we'll see queries, it's like, a story like this has never been done. And I'm like, I can name 10 off the top of my head. And so for me, that's a big red flag if you don't seem to respect your genre. And for the first pages, like I'm not really like I never sign up to do the first page critiques. I don't know, it's just not, it's not one of my things, but some of the things that make me stop reading are a complete lack of conflict. Like if a character's just like brushing their teeth and not having any original thoughts, and I'm just like, what's happening? Why is this happening? That's a big thing for me if I'm not connecting with the character right away. And if your book does start out with like useless action, because people always say start with action, and then people end up writing this kind of empty action where I don't care what's happening, I will actually just skip over it and if there's something else there. And then I have received some submissions before that opened with the main character having some levels of misogyny, but not being, like the book wasn't self-aware of it. And so obviously that's an automatic stop reading.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few pet peeves that I have that are what I would say like auto no's. Problematic content is probably the auto no. I guess cliched openings, like the general kind of what you've seen in a lot of lists of cliched openings, like character waking up and looking in the mirror and getting ready for school. Those are, it's almost an auto no for me because there's just nothing there that's going to draw me in unless you're really subverting it somehow. It's less of a pet peeve, but more of what actually it's not really what draws me away from pages, but what draws me to pages. And Sarah was kind of hitting on it a little bit, is pacing in the opening chapters is really, really hard to get right. But when you hit that right note, it really, really sings. And I find that most of the things that I request have really strongly paced first chapters. And what helps the pacing in those chapters is that the character has a goal, and that goal is established in the first 250 words. And it's usually a small goal. It's usually not what their goal is going to be throughout the book. It's usually not like the grand adventure or whatever, but it's like, to use my mentee's book from last year, for example, it starts with the main character wanting to get picked for this training ritual where she's going to fight her essentially arch nemesis. And she just really wants to get picked. And you just feel this character like wanting to get picked. It's a small thing, but it hasn't been a small thing for her leading up to that point. And so you feel yourself connecting to this character's single want. And then after because this character wants something and you've connected with it, then it's going to be a lot easier to digest the action because you're already aligned with that character. So really the whole point of your first chapter is to get the reader to connect with your character. And I find the easiest way to do that is through some kind of small micro goal because we all want things in life. And when we see the character wanting something, then we want it with them. And then boom, connection. Yay.
I hate following Ashley because she says it so eloquently, but I write so I don't have to talk. Also, I'm losing my voice. But when it comes to queries, my huge turnoff is queries that are formatted incorrectly. There's so much on the internet. So, fall back on the, introductory, here's my character, but when, something happens that here's an obstacle, and here's why their goal is important. I've been doing a lot of freelance editing in the last year, and I would say that is a universal problem, and it doesn't need to be, because queries are, I know they sound scary, but I don't know, I actually love query writing. But first pages, yeah, I think everybody said it. I want to connect. I want to see the character in an interesting situation or having interesting thoughts. If I get to page 5 and I don't know your character's name or gender or age range, I get really antsy. That's like a completely personal thing, but I start to become really aware that I don't know how to place this character within their own society and their own world. So just try and get that in there. I don't auto-reject for that. I would say most submissions that I've gotten in the past haven't started in the correct place. So I'll definitely, if the writing is strong, I'll keep going, to kind of find out where that fits together. But
Natasha, did you say you wanted to add a little bit? Okay.
Yes. First, in re-queries, if you have not already if you have not already drowned hours of your life into Query Shark, I highly recommend it. That is one of the best ways to drown hours of your life on the internet. You will learn so much. Again, that is Query Shark. It is exactly what it sounds like. It's not exactly what it sounds like. There aren't sharks, but it is just very to the point, useful critiques of real queries. It's amazing. Secondly, this is a little sideways to the question, because this is not what will make me stop reading the first 15 pages. Something that will make me stop reading a full manuscript almost right away is if so I've read the first 10, 15 pages. I don't even remember how many they submit. How many? Anyway, I've read those pages, and then the rest of the story is much sloppier than the initial pages I was sent. That makes it feel like you had the ability to make it better and you chose not to. And I want a manuscript that is exactly as good as you can get it without my help, so that I can get it as good as we can beyond that. So if I feel like you really polished up your opening pages and then you didn't do that work for the rest of the manuscript, then that's telling me that you're not willing to put in all of the work that you're able to do.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So we are over the halfway point, which means it's time to talk about Writer's Life apparel. The Pitchforce swag this year is awesome. And I don't have my Pitchforce shirt tonight, but I do have another Writer's Life shirt that says, "I will run on words and wine." There's a lot of cool stuff over there, but if you buy a Pitchforce thing, the money, some of the proceeds go towards helping build the community, and we'll get cool stuff. Oh, Ashley, unmute your mic so you can be seen big. Ashley is donning our amazing, what are you wearing exactly?
It's a shirt that says Pitch Wars.
It's gorgeous. And isn't it like the softest shirt in the world?
Oh, it is so soft.
So support Pitch Wars, whether you're a mentee, a mentor, or just someone who likes Pitch Wars, because let's be honest, we are all Pitch Wars, whether we get in or not. So
this one has sleeves too.
Ooh, I should get a long sleeve one.
I like sleeves.
Okay, so we have some more specific questions, which, by the way, for those who have tuned in and are asking their questions on #AskMentor, thank you so much. Our Twitter Captain Cat Show is sending them to me. Don't worry if we don't get to your question. A lot of mentors will go on the feed and answer them there. And you can always add us if you really want one of us to answer. So the next one is a little specific. So everyone, let me know if you want to answer this. What do you think makes for the best kind of antagonist, protags get the focus, but I feel villains need attention too. And this is from L. Ryan Storms. Who would like to take this one first? Laura, I saw a hand there.
I really love villains. I am a Slytherin, so that makes sense. And I think what makes the villain really great is for them to have believable roles. I mean, this is really cliche, and I think everyone has said that, but villains never believe they're actually villains, which is really important for their motivation because, I mean, they have their own goals. Nobody likes to think they're the villains. So they can't be just evil for fun. They have an actual goal. They want to achieve things. They feel things. Because villains don't have any feelings, and that's not true. Like, the more feelings they have, because that means they're real. That means they're an actual antagonist and who is an actual person, just like your main character. I think one of the really important things is just to go through your villain scenes and just make sure you have feelings. They're not just cold and distant, because that is boring. We want real people as villains, and we want to root for villains too. So if you have this was actually in my bio, so if you have a romantic interest who's the villain, send it to me, please.
I just wanted to add, so I also love villains, and I'm particularly looking for villain stories. And that doesn't mean, especially villain origin stories, and that doesn't mean it has to be a villain that we already know, like a retelling origin story, but just someone's path to becoming a villain. And I also, I'm really done with the hero chosen one trope, but I feel like it would be really interesting to see, I guess, the dark one or the villain chosen one trope, like in reverse, I guess. One of my favorite villains, and I know he gets a lot of crap from the Star Wars fan base, but I really love Kylo Ren. And I think a lot of the part of his story is being told from a young age, like, you are going to be this, and having this kind of darker expectation, and what having like a villainous expectation or a villainous destiny put on you kind of does to you and changes you. So, I mean, like, I would love a story where they're all villains, and really the true antagonist is just the one that's slightly worse than all of the kind of really bad characters. So I'm really into villains, and I'm really into exploring the dichotomies that occur, because I think that Laura was right that no one thinks that they are a villain. And I'm particularly interested in characters who kind of struggle with dualities of nature and of culture, and who are straddling two different worlds. And in trying to achieve that balance, that's what makes them, I guess, make those bad decisions. Anyway, yeah, I love villains.
I am also a Slytherin. However, I don't think that Slytherins are necessarily villainous. So that tells you a little bit something. But I think a lot of the time when I really love a villain, it's because they are as much of a person as the protagonist. They're fully developed, fully realized. They have their own wishes and wants and motivations. And the worst villain to me is like this stereotypical high school mean girl who has like no depth whatsoever and is just mean to the main character. And so I don't want anything like that. I want a villain who has deep-seated motivations for what they're doing, and especially if we can sympathize for them, even if it's just a little bit, that's really when I start connecting with a villain.
One thing I haven't seen much of in YA that I would find super interesting is a villain that is the setting, or like Beware the Wild is one of my favorite Southern Gothics, and it's got a villainous swamp, something like that, where like the antagonist is a force of nature, like a hurricane or something like that. So villain doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It can also be like a force of nature, or any kind of antagonistic force that isn't necessarily a person embodied. So
I think that's a really, really awesome point. And if you wrote something like that, sub it to me, not Ashley.
no. I have Southern Gothic on my wish list.
Well, hey, it's on my wish list too.
All the other Gothic.
Guys, the war has not started yet. That is in like next week.
It's never too early to fight.
I have one small thing to add about villains. I agree with everything that everyone has said. I also find that a lot of times people try to add depth to the villains by making them tragic and talking about their sad backstory. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a lot of times people who do terrible things do have sad backstories. But I find that the most interesting villains are the ones who are understandable without that. Like the ones where it's not necessarily that you see that their dark past made them twisted so much as you can just see that they have these motivations and that they're willing to do things to get them, where either they don't care about the consequences or they don't notice the consequences or they think they're reasonable. But I think that sadness and anger and angst are completely reasonable driving forces, but they're not the only ones. And a lot of my favorite villains are the ones who aren't necessarily heartbroken, but they're the ones who are either very privileged or just have very different moral systems, and they're driven by selfishness or they're driven by a sense that the world is supposed to be a certain way, and things that we don't automatically think of as sympathetic in the way that I think we all see my parents were brutally murdered as something that makes us sympathize with characters, but we don't necessarily see I really strongly believe in this thing that you don't believe in as sympathetic. I think that that could make for a really interesting and compelling antagonist if you take that seriously rather than just seeing it as a sort of villainous stereotype.
Can I get a YA Cersei Lannister origin story, please? Anybody have that?
Yes, please. Those ones are best, please. No, mine.
And the buy those are coming out already tonight. Also, I was going to do this during the commercial break. I'm going to have it to do in hashtag Extra Mentor game just for the people tuning in live, unless no one gets the answer correctly, and then whoever watches the replay, feel free to try to win. So as you see, I have 2 Pitch Wars mugs, and they are quite lovely. And I have been drinking out of both. So the first person to guess correctly what is in each of these mugs could be the same, it could be different. If anyone gets that right, the first person to @ me and hashtag Extra Mentor and Pitch Wars gets a voucher for 2 extra mentors to apply to. Anyway, good luck, and that can start now. So our next question is from SL Choi. Curious about YA mentors looking for fantasy. What do you mean by dark, gritty, scary? Just no fluffy rabbits talking? Who would like to tackle what does that mean? Natasha, you want to go first?
I feel bad because I just talked. First of all, you can definitely have talking rabbits in dark fantasy. If anything, I think that would be fascinating. To me, dark fantasy is a lot what I think of when I think of any genre being dark. It's about first of all, the themes, and second of all, the stakes. Like, I don't want to say death because I don't think death is necessary in dark fantasy, but it's stuff like that where the stakes are major and real and the consequences are a lot more grim. Often dark fantasy is what to me most closely mirrors our world. I think of dystopias as a very different thing from dark fantasy, but Game of Thrones, for example, is a very classic case of dark fantasy. The stakes are very high, things happen that are very unpleasant and uncomfortable, and as we all know, people die. I also think that dark for me means that a happy ending is not guaranteed. It doesn't mean that a happy ending can't happen, but you don't necessarily go into it assuming that everything's going to work out, and you don't necessarily go into it assuming that you're going to like every character, including you're not necessarily going to like the protagonist. And gritty, I think, has more to do with violence and theft and that kind of thing. I think that something can be dark without necessarily being gritty. Personally, I don't care as much about grit. I care about stakes and consequences and about things not always being happy and happiness needing to be earned and fought for and not always gained. I think that grit is more a case of tone and content. I rambled a lot. Someone else talk now.
So I personally like dark fantasy a lot, or dark anything really. And I think what Natasha said is on point. I think for me, what works a lot, it's about the world itself, how violent it is, and how everything, it's atmosphere, which is really hard to do. So I understand how you can be confused by what dark fantasy means. And sometimes it's about consequences and about the main character. For me, it works as an anti-hero and revenge stories. For example, I really, really love revenge stories. So I think it can be about that, like someone who wants revenge and then they just go for it. There are consequences, of course, because that's the best thing. Have you guys seen, you probably saw it, Saw? And I think it has some really dark and horror elements, but it has consequences. Like if you're willing to do what it takes, you can get out alive, which I think is really important. But it also has that dark atmosphere. It's really something great. So I think it's more for me about atmosphere than anything else. I don't mind violence. That is really weird, but I'm gonna say I like violence. But yeah. But I don't like gendered violence. For example, Game of Thrones, especially the TV show, has some really weird on the sign of like rape, and that is really discomforting. I don't mind if you have graphic rape as long as you are able to talk about it in a real way. But Game of Thrones just sexualizes it, and I really hate it. So if you have anything like sexualizing
I think,
and like these.
Sorry, I think your audio kind of went for a little bit. Want to try it one more time? Are you good? Did you finish? Sorry. Okay, we just had a brief audio problem on my end. Anyway, so we have this cool question from Amelia Hollingsworth. Who has the record for most rejections? How about most rejections in a single day? So, you know, writing can be like Fight Club. So a lot of times people don't talk about these things, but that's why you need your community. I will say, I think the most in one day I've gotten is 6. And there may have been some tears, which is totally part of, you know, the normal process of life. But overall, I mean, I've been rejected more than 6 times. 6 times in one day is just my record. Sarah, thoughts?
Yeah, so I teach writing workshops at the library, and sometimes someone will say something to me like, oh, I sent this off and I got 12 rejections, so I think I'm just done. And I'm like, talk to me when you're in multiple triple digits. But I did get a query rejection once. It was basically the agent said, there's literally nothing that I like about this book. And so number isn't so much as some of the feedback that you can get back. And why would you say that to someone? I don't know. Anyway, I would never say that to anyone, even if it was true. And I'm a Slytherin, so that tells you something. But rejection is just part of the business, and so like to try to like keep score of rejections is just like kind of a terrible way to live. So don't do that.
I wanted to answer in like kind of the opposite direction, because I think writers can get super caught up in the fact that like there's a lot of rejection in writing, but you do want the match to go both ways, and you want someone who's like super passionate about you, just like you're super passionate about them. So not every rejection is a bad thing. Like sometimes you know, it's great that that person rejected you. And so I just want to tell a quick story about it going the opposite way. So before I had my agent, I submitted a book to an independent, smaller publisher that has a fine reputation. There's nothing wrong with this publisher. But I'm also a lawyer in my day job, and I saw their contract, and there were just some things that just didn't work for me as a person, didn't work for my goals, just didn't align up with what I wanted. And I spent like literally a year and a half trying to work out that contract issue, and it just never worked out. And at the end of the day, like, you really have to ask yourself, like, what are my goals? And is this agent, is this publisher, is this whatever, do they have the same goals as me? And if they don't, you don't want to work with them. And so don't forget that that sometimes you'll have to reject things too. And so it was like the best possible thing I could have done, honestly, rejecting that publisher. And now I'm having a book come out with a different publisher, and I'm super excited about how it's going. And so just, you know, be aware that, like, you know, this is a thing that you're just gonna have to get used to, and you're gonna have to do it to people too. So just try to toughen up a little bit, but like Nikki said, like, get some friends and have people come in to, like, you know, comfort you when you need.
Well, Ruth Ann, that's like an editor's dream answer in terms of, like, just, it's hard because I'm a writer on one end and an editor on the other end. And so I'm receiving rejections as I'm writing them in my day job, which actually kind of makes the whole process easier, because as an editor, I understand just how much you have to love a manuscript in order to take it on for publication. And it has to be something that you want to read 7 times before it comes out. So it has to be something that it has to be so special that it keeps you up at night. It can't just be a good manuscript. So I'm constantly rejecting really good manuscripts because I didn't obsess over it. And that obsession is what I'm looking for. Just one quick personal story. As a writer, I got a rejection that seemed okay. And then the agent went and twisted my manuscript into a really snarky tweet. And it was obviously my manuscript that she was talking about, but she took this line out of context, and that really irritated me. So that's why I don't tweet about my submissions inbox, even though sometimes I get things that I'm like, oh my God. I get some things that just blow my mind sometimes, but I'm not going to air dirty laundry on Twitter because of that one little irritant that just drove me crazy. And I'm keeping that with me forever.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add too that rejection just happens at every level of publishing and at every level in Pitch Wars. Like, if you're a Pitch Wars mentor and you want a manuscript and several other mentors want it, and you go to war, which is the whole premise of Pitch Wars, right? They can reject, like, the mentee can reject you, which also stings. And so it's like a never-ending round. My debut that comes out in September was rejected by 23 publishers. And my agent had a system where she would gather them for me and then give them to me all at once, which was like brutal and also nice, because I guess it didn't get strung along, but it was really hard. And it was really hard to separate those rejections from how I felt about the work. And I thought that it was just not good enough to be published. And I was ready to shelf it and move on. And then it got bought by Greenwillow at HarperCollins, and then I had to, like, mentally backtrack and be like, oh, maybe I have to, like, relearn that it's not totally awful. So I think the best thing you can do is just separate the quality of your work and yourself as a writer from those rejections, because it's always going to happen at every level.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Guys, I cannot emphasize how important it is to find your community, especially within a community like Pitch Wars. Go on the forums, find a Facebook group, because I'm not going to lie, if it wasn't for my group of 2014 mentees, which is how I got into Pitch Wars. They have scraped me off the floor many a time in this whole process. Anyway, I know it's the end of the hour, but we all wanted to answer one last question, and it's on what piece of advice would you give a writer trying to make it? Because let's be honest, we all need that kind of knowledge and encouragement. And we're going to start with Isabel.
Oh man. Okay, so if I were to say writing advice, you're going to see so many different methods and systems on how to write a book, on how to keep going, on how to deal with rejection, on how to deal while you're on submission. And then finally, what to do when you get a book deal. You're going to see so many different things. I think for me, during this entire process of starting to write, getting into Pitch Wars, becoming a mentor, going through the career tensions, all of that, I realized that I needed to find what worked for me. And so I would encourage you to find a system, like start with your book and find a system that works for you on how to write your book, how to revise your book. It does not have to look like anything that somebody else is doing, and that's okay. You could be writing from the middle onward first, or you could be writing your ending, whatever. It just, and if you take rejections one way, it's okay. Like, it's okay to get sad. It's okay to feel discouraged, but then know that you are not alone in that. So I think that the writing community is such a big community, and there's so much advice out there, but I would say just take care of yourself, figure out what works for you. Certainly be teachable and learn. And that way you are building that foundation for yourself. So that would be my advice.
So, all writer advice is kind of cliche. It's the don't give up thing. So I'm going to do something different. I had inspiration tweets or something else. Basically, like Kanye West. Have you seen his ego? It's amazing and it's admirable. So think of yourself as Kanye West. No one can get you. No one gets your art. You just do you and ignore. I'm not going to say that is not good because critique is really important. So you should listen to other writers. Rejection, just blind yourself to everything else. Be Kanye West. Be Nicki Minaj. They're the best. So they don't have to get upset about rejection because you're great.
So I usually tell writers that persistence is the most important thing. And I do think it's important, but I think that even though persistence and discipline is important, sometimes it's a little overrated. And I've actually come to think that the most important virtue for a writer is self-forgiveness. Because at some point your writing is always going to disappoint you, and your laziness or your failure to meet your self-imposed deadline will disappoint you. You'll make vows like I'm going to write for an hour every day, and then you won't do it. So I think that continuing to write after that kind of heartache or disappointment kind of takes a self-forgiveness and to, I guess, be nice to yourself and be nice to the people around you and find that kind of tribe of support.
Everyone already took the good advice already. My biggest thing that wasn't already said is always keep your eye on what you love about writing and what you love about the story, because at any stage, whether it's brainstorming, plotting, querying, submission, after the fact when it's sold and you're trying to market it, at every single point there are going to be frustrations and there are going to be rejections, and it's never going to be exactly what you want it to be. And there are always going to be points where you go, why am I doing this? What's the point? And am I really any good at this? And the fact is that at the end of the day, you're doing this because you love to. No one becomes a writer to become rich and famous. Wealth and fame are great, and hopefully you can accomplish that, but at the end of the day, you're doing this because you love writing, and you're putting weeks or months or years of your life into a single book because you love it. So whatever you need, whether it's playlists or mood boards or Post-it notes on the wall or just something to remind yourself, remember what keep that spark and remember what it is that is making this worth it. And don't let yourself get so bogged down in the parts that aren't working, because there will always be parts that aren't working.
I really loved everybody's advice so far. I recently went to a conference, and a gentleman gave some advice about like applying principles of like cognitive behavioral therapy to yourself as you are writing, which sounds very complicated, but was really interesting to me. So every writer deals with like self-doubt and being disappointed and just various frustrations. And if you can catch yourself in those moments and remind yourself of things that are true, you'll just be a lot kinder to yourself. You'll be a lot happier. Like if you're thinking, oh, my writing isn't as good as so-and-so's, you know, you just need to remind yourself, like, I'm probably reading a finished draft. Like, this is a published book. It's been written and rewritten. It's been edited, you know, and of course it's not as good. Like, it's just nobody's first draft is as good as a published draft. It's just not, you know. And so I think being kind to yourself in that way, and like always remembering, you know, the things that are true about your writing. And then if you need to like take a break, and the things that are true about your life, like there will be times when just you have too much going on in your personal life to like be like, I'm gonna write 2 hours on every weekend and 30 minutes every night, and sometimes that's just not going to work out for you. And I think being honest about that and giving yourself a break is going to be the most important thing, and making sure that this is a long-term thing you're doing and that you don't burn out before you reach your goals.
My standard like go-to advice is to read as widely as you can. There are very few ways to grow as a writer that are as good as reading outside of your comfort level. And I think when you start reading outside your comfort level, then you start writing outside your comfort level, and that's when you really grow. But I will also add, and this is like a really tough thing to admit to yourself, is not every book deserves to be published, and that's okay. And that's totally fine. And it doesn't mean that you're a terrible writer. It just means it didn't work out this time. Like, anytime you do anything, whether it's like a meal or anything, there's going to be ones that just aren't that good, you know, and that's totally fine, and that's just part of the process. So to forgive yourself for that is really important.
I've been bouncing off of Sarah a lot, but one of my favorite pieces of writing advice is always don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I'm of the opinion that when the day comes that you do get published, you're getting published with the book that was meant to be your debut. That when that moment comes, it was with the right book. So if it isn't working out with something, don't be afraid to shelve it and try again, shelve it and move on. But I love Nikki's advice about find your people. I don't know where I would be without the community around me. Especially as an extroverted person, I tend to fuel off of a community support. So getting involved in the writing community was the number one thing that I did personally to boost myself. And don't compare yourself to others ever. That's a really, really dangerous game to play, because it's only going to end badly for your confidence, for your writing, for jealousy, whatever the game may be. This isn't a comparison game. It goes back to being part of the community. The community is here to uplift people, and there's never one place for somebody. If a friend gets an agent, then it doesn't mean you failed to get an agent. It just means that we are celebrating your friend today. In general, it's a really supportive community that you're a part of. So it doesn't bode well to ever make those comparisons. But I guess like the ultimate piece of writing advice for me is that there is no advice that works 100% of the time. And this goes for whether you're talking about like grammar and syntax, or whether you're talking about more general things. It's writing has no rules. So don't be afraid to try something different just because it worked for you in the past and maybe now it's not working, so you need to change things up. Or somebody did this, so that means I have to do it. No, that's not true, because everybody's different. Everybody's lives are different. Everybody's writing habits are different. Everybody's minds are different. So don't ever feel like there is one way to write, because there isn't. There are no rules to this game. We're all having fun, hopefully.
Wow, I hate going last on a question like this, but yeah, the two things. Process is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, because thinking that I was supposed to do it in a certain way kept me from writing fiction for decades. So, you know, find your own way, figure out the best way that fits your life, that fits your emotions, that fits your creative process. You know, I once ruined a book by thinking I had to outline things. I tried to outline it and then I completely lost interest in it. I didn't care anymore. That's me. My co-mentor, Beth Hall, is the outliner extraordinaire. And she uses every process in the world and she's fantastic at it. And which leads me to the whole community end of things. Unlike Ashley, I'm a complete introvert, but it's almost, you know, writing can be very isolating. You sit at a typewriter, maybe you have headphones on, maybe you're in, you know, your house alone, whatever. Having that community to just reach out to, just a touchstone to touch base and say, where are you? How are you? What's going on? Bounce ideas off of people. It's absolutely invaluable. And everybody really does try to root for everyone else and uplift each other. And it's amazing. It's unlike anything I've certainly ever experienced in any other area of my life. So.
Well, thank you guys so much. And thank you, Pitchboards hopefuls, for tuning in and watching tonight. We did go a little bit over, but I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Feel free to ask us all questions online. And if we missed your question, we will try to get to it on the feed. Anyway, have a good night and may the pitch be with you.